You were never broken. You were just awake in a world that wants you asleep. You were never too sensitive. You were just seeing clearly in a world that profits from your blindness. You were never the problem. You were just the one willing to feel everything they refused to acknowledge. Carl Jung saw it all. The Swiss psychiatrist who dared to map the human psyche in ways that made people uncomfortable. He understood that most of what we call normal is a collective agreement to stay unconscious. He knew that the moment you start seeing the patterns, questioning the scripts, feeling the truth beneath the surface, you become dangerous. Dangerous to systems that need you confused. Dangerous to people who need you small. Dangerous to a world that has built itself on your willingness to doubt your perceptions. Jung warned us about the shadow, not just the personal shadow of our repressed parts, but the collective shadow of humanity. The things we refuse to see about ourselves as a species. The truths about human behavior that are so unsettling, so threatening to the status quo, that they get buried beneath layers of social conditioning and psychological manipulation. But here's what they don't want you to know. Once you understand these truths, you can never be manipulated the same way again. Once you see the patterns, you become immune to the games. Once you know how human behavior works, you stop being a victim of it. If you don't know these 35 truths, people will keep using your unconscious patterns against you. They'll keep exploiting your need to belong, your fear of abandonment, your desire to be seen as good. They'll keep you trapped in cycles that serve them while slowly eroding your soul. But when you know, everything changes. Here's the truth that changes everything. 1. Most people are not living their own lives. They're living the life their family programmed into them, performing the role society assigned them, fulfilling expectations that were never theirs to begin with. When you meet someone, you're rarely meeting them. You're meeting their conditioning. The real person is buried so deep that they've forgotten they exist. 2. Your nervous system remembers what your mind has forgotten. That feeling of unease around certain people isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. Your body is reading micro-expressions, vocal tones, and energy patterns that your conscious mind can't process fast enough. When someone makes you feel drained or anxious for no logical reason, there's always a reason. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. 3. Most emotional reactions are not about the present moment. They're about unhealed wounds from the past being triggered by current events. When someone responds with rage to a minor inconvenience, when they crumble at the slightest criticism, when they panic at the thought of being alone, you're witnessing their wounded child, not their adult self. Understanding this changes everything about how you navigate relationships. 4. People will unconsciously try to recreate their childhood dynamics with you. The person who has controlling parents will either become controlling themselves or attract controlling partners. The person who was emotionally neglected will either become emotionally unavailable or desperately seek validation. They're not choosing these patterns. They're being driven by unconscious programming that feels like home, even when home was harmful. 5. Projection is humanity's favorite defense mechanism. Whatever someone accuses you of, whatever they claim you are, whatever faults they constantly point out in you, look for those exact qualities in them. The things that trigger us most in others are mirrors of our own shadow. The person who calls you selfish is usually the most selfish. The person who questions your integrity usually has integrity issues themselves. 6. Most people would rather be right than be happy. They'll cling to beliefs that cause them suffering rather than examine whether those beliefs serve them. They'll stay in situations that drain their life force rather than admit they made a mistake. They'll sacrifice their peace to maintain their self-image. Being right becomes more important than being free. 7. Gaslighting is everywhere, And most people don't even know they're doing it. It's not just the obvious manipulation, it's the subtle invalidation of your experience. You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. That's not what happened. You're being dramatic. Most people learn to gaslight as a survival mechanism in childhood, and now they do it automatically whenever someone's truth threatens their comfort. 8. Your healing threatens other people's denial. When you start seeing clearly, setting boundaries, refusing to participate in dysfunctional dynamics, it makes others uncomfortable because it highlights unconsciousness. Your growth is a mirror that shows them what they're avoiding. They'll try to pull you back into old patterns, not because they want to hurt you, but because your transformation challenges their worldview. 9. Most people are addicted to drama because it feels like aliveness. Chaos becomes familiar. Crisis becomes comfortable. They create problems to solve, start fights to feel passionate, and manufacture emergencies to feel important. Calm feels like death to someone whose nervous system was shaped by instability. They'll sabotage peace because peace feels foreign. 10. The people who claim to love you the most are often the ones who know your wounds the best and use them against you. They know exactly which buttons to push, which insecurities to activate, which fears to exploit. They've studied your pain and learned to weaponize it. This isn't always conscious. Often it's learned behavior from their wounded history, but the effect is the same. Love becomes a battleground where your deepest vulnerabilities become their tools of control. 11. Most people mistake intensity for intimacy. They confuse drama with depth, chaos with connection, and obsession with love. They think that if it doesn't hurt, it's not real. They've been conditioned to believe that love should be a struggle, that if someone doesn't trigger their abandonment wounds, they must not care enough. Healthy love feels boring to someone addicted to emotional roller coasters. 12. Your boundaries are not suggestions. They're non-negotiable truths about what you will and won't accept. But most people will test them, push them, and try to negotiate with them. They'll make you feel guilty for having them, selfish for maintaining them, crazy for needing them. This is how you know your boundaries are working. When people get upset about them, it means the boundaries are protecting you from something they want to take. 13. The person who refuses to discuss their behavior is showing you their behavior. When someone deflects, changes the subject, gets angry, plays victim, or shuts down whenever you try to address their actions, that response is the answer. Their refusal to engage is engagement. Their silence is communication. Their defensiveness is confession. 14. Most people are performing a version of themselves they think will be accepted. The real person is hidden behind layers of adaptation, people-pleasing, and image management. They've learned to monitor themselves constantly, adjusting their personality based on who they're with, what they think is expected, and what will keep them safe. The exhaustion you feel around certain people is because you're not interacting with them. You're interacting with their performance. 15. Your intuition is more accurate than their explanation. When someone's words don't match their energy, when their actions contradict their promises, when something feels off despite their reassurances, trust the feeling. Your intuition is picking up on an incongruence that your logical mind is trying to rationalize away. The part of you that knows is always right, even when you can't prove it yet. Jung understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. We are not who we think we are. We are not the heroes of our own stories, the victims of our circumstances, or the products of our achievements. We are walking collections of unconscious patterns, inherited traumas, and adaptive strategies that once served us, but now imprison us. The person sitting across from you at dinner is not really there. They're a constellation of past experiences, parental voices, cultural programming, and unhealed wounds pretending to be a person. The voice in your head that you think is you is a committee of internalized others, Parents, teachers, friends, enemies, media, all chattering about what you should do, who you should be, how you should feel. This isn't cynical, this is liberation, because once you understand that most human behavior is an unconscious reaction rather than a conscious choice, you stop taking things personally. You start seeing the patterns instead of getting lost in the drama. You recognize that when someone hurts you, they're usually operating from their pain, not from any truth about who you are. 16. Most people are fighting wars that ended decades ago. They're defending against threats that no longer exist, protecting themselves from people who are no longer in their lives, and solving problems that have already been resolved. Their current relationships become battlegrounds for old grievances. They see enemies where there are only mirrors. 17. The stories people tell about their past reveal more about their present wounds than about what actually happened. How they frame their experiences, which details they emphasize, and what emotions they attach to events. This shows you where they're still stuck. Someone who constantly talks about being betrayed is usually someone who betrays others. Someone who always positions themselves as the victim is usually someone who victimizes others. 18. Most people will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. They'll stay in jobs that crush their spirit, relationships that drain their energy, living situations that limit their growth. Not because they don't deserve better, but because better feels dangerous. Change, even positive change, activates their nervous system's alarm bells. The devil they know feels safer than the angel they don't. 19. Your childhood programmed you to accept certain types of treatment as normal. If you grew up with emotional neglect, emotional unavailability feels like home. If you grew up with criticism, you'll feel uncomfortable with genuine praise. If you grew up with chaos, stability will feel wrong. Your nervous system was shaped by your earliest experiences, and it will try to recreate those conditions throughout your life. 20. People who refuse to take responsibility for their impact on others are the most dangerous. They'll hurt you and make it your fault for being hurt. They'll cross your boundaries and blame you for having them. They'll cause problems and position themselves as the victim. They live in a reality where they are always innocent, always justified, always misunderstood. This level of unconsciousness is devastating to everyone around them. 21. Most people mistake their thoughts for truth. They believe every story their mind tells them, every interpretation their fear creates, every narrative their ego constructs. They don't understand that thoughts are just mental events, not facts, not commands, not reality. This is why they live in constant emotional chaos, reacting to internal weather as if it were external reality. 22. The people who trigger you most are your greatest teachers. They're showing you exactly where you still have work to do, where you're still unconscious, where you're still giving your power away. Your triggers are treasure maps leading to your unhealed parts. The person who makes you feel small is showing you where you abandoned yourself. The person who makes you feel crazy is showing you where you doubt your truth. 23. Most people are living in reaction to their parents rather than from their center. They're either rebelling against everything their parents stood for or desperately trying to win approval they never received. Both reactions keep them trapped in childhood dynamics. True freedom comes when you stop reacting to your parents altogether, when you live from your values, make your own choices, and create your definition of success. 24. Emotional maturity is not about age, it's about consciousness. You can meet 50-year-olds who are emotional toddlers and 25-year-olds who are emotionally wise. Maturity is the ability to regulate your own emotions, take responsibility for your actions, communicate directly, and maintain your center regardless of external circumstances. Most people never develop these skills because they're never taught them. 25. The masks people wear in public are usually the opposite of who they are in private. The person who's always upbeat may be deeply depressed. The person who presents as confident and successful may be riddled with insecurity. The person who's always helping others may be completely unable to help themselves. Public personas are usually compensations for private wounds. 26. Most conflict is not about the thing people are fighting about. It's about unmet needs, unhealed wounds, and unexpressed emotions from the past being projected onto present situations. The couple fighting about dishes is usually fighting about feeling valued. The co-workers arguing about a project are usually arguing about feeling respected. Surface-level conflicts are almost always symptoms of deeper issues. 27. People will show you who they are through their actions, but you have to be willing to see it. Words are easy, promises are cheap. Anyone can say they love you, care about you, and respect you. But how do they treat you when they're stressed? How do they respond when you set boundaries? How do they behave when they think no one is watching? Their actions and unguarded moments reveal their true character. 28. Your need to be liked is keeping you from being loved. When you contort yourself to fit other people's expectations, when you hide your true thoughts and feelings, when you agree to things you don't want to do, you're offering a performance, not yourself. The approval you receive is for the character you're playing, not for who you are. Real love can only happen when you're willing to be disliked for being yourself. 29. Most people are more afraid of their power than they are of their weakness. Weakness feels familiar. It's safe. It absolves them of responsibility. But power, the power to create change, to set boundaries, to say no, to walk away, that's terrifying. Because with power comes responsibility. With consciousness comes choice. With awareness comes the inability to blame others for their life. 30. The way people treat service workers reveals their true character. How they speak to waitresses, cashiers, janitors, delivery drivers, people who can't fight back, people who depend on tips, people who have to be polite regardless of how they're treated. This is where their real personality shows up. Kindness toward people who can do nothing for them reveals genuine character. Jung knew that the path to wholeness was not through perfection, but through integration. Not through becoming someone else, but through accepting all the parts of yourself. The light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, the healed and the wounded. He understood that most psychological suffering comes from what he called the collision between the unconscious and conscious mind. Those moments when our deep programming conflicts with our surface desires, when our shadow impulses contradict our self-image, when our unhealed parts sabotage our conscious goals. But here's what Jung discovered. The very things we're most ashamed of, most afraid of, most desperate to hide, these are often the keys to our greatest gifts. The person who was abandoned as a child becomes exquisitely sensitive to others' emotional needs. The person who was criticized becomes a master of seeing beauty in imperfection. The person who was controlled becomes a fierce protector of others' freedom. Your wounds are not just scars, they're portals. They're the places where light gets in, where wisdom grows, where compassion is born. 31. Your greatest strength is usually your greatest weakness turned inside out. The sensitivity that makes you vulnerable also makes you intuitive. The intensity that exhausts others also fuels your passion. The perfectionism that paralyzes you also creates your attention to beauty. What you think makes you broken might make you beautiful. 32. Most people are living their lives backward, trying to heal the past instead of creating the future. They're so focused on fixing what went wrong, understanding what happened, and getting closure from people who hurt them, that they forget to build what they want. Healing is important, but it's not the end goal. The end goal is creating a life so beautiful that the past loses its power over you. 33. The people who have hurt you the most have often taught you the most about love. Not because their treatment was loving, but because their lack of love showed you exactly what love is not. Their cruelty taught you to value kindness. Their abandonment taught you to value presence. Their lies taught you to value truth. Your pain became your compass, pointing you toward what you need. 34. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. If you grew up in chaos, you need stillness. If you grew up with emotional neglect, you need emotional attunement. If you grew up with criticism, you need acceptance. Healing requires different conditions than wounding. Sometimes the most radical act of self-love is changing your entire environment. 35. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Not with a family who guilt-tripped you, not with friends who drain you, not with partners who manipulate you, not with co-workers who disrespect you, not with anyone who thinks your well-being is less important than their comfort. Your peace is your life force, your creativity, your joy. Protecting it is not selfish, it's sacred. When you truly understand these truths, something profound happens. You stop needing others to validate your reality. You stop explaining yourself to people who are determined to misunderstand you. You stop fighting for space in relationships where you're not wanted. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who benefit from your doubt. You become dangerous in the most beautiful way. Dangerous to systems that require your unconsciousness. Dangerous to people who need you small. Dangerous to a world that profits from your pain. You start living from your center instead of from your wounds. You start choosing relationships that nourish you instead of ones that need you. You start creating a life that reflects your values instead of one that accommodates everyone else's expectations. You realize that you were never broken. You were just human, trying to survive in a world that didn't teach you how to thrive. You were never too much. You were just alive in a world that preferred you numb. You were never the problem. You were just the solution that hadn't found its proper context yet. Jung understood that individuation, becoming who you are, is the most radical act possible. Because when you know yourself, you can't be controlled. When you trust yourself, you can't be manipulated. When you love yourself, you can't be diminished. The world needs you awake. It needs you to be conscious. It needs you whole, not performing, not pleasing, not pretending. Just finally, fearlessly, beautifully yourself. This is your invitation to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This is your permission to trust what you know, feel what you feel, and want what you want. This is your reminder that your sensitivity is not a weakness, it's a superpower. Your depth is not a burden, it's a gift. Your truth is not too much, it's exactly enough. You were never meant to be smaller so others could be more comfortable. You were meant to be exactly as vast, as complex, as contradictory, as magnificent as you are. The game is over, the performance can end, the real you is ready to begin.